Did you know that Mexico City is the largest city in North America? With hundreds of museums, tranquil green spaces, an incredible foodie scene, this cultural hub was like nothing I had been taught to expect. When I first went to Mexico City, I more so went through it to get to Puerto Vallarta rather than going specifically to Mexico City to see what was there. Last year, I decided to spend some dedicated time there with my sister right after my solo trip to Oaxaca City, which I talked about in a previous video. So often, we are only taught to fear certain destinations. This really robs us of getting to truly know a place for ourselves to see how much more it actually has to offer than a lot of times what we see in the media. Mexico City was one of those places for me. I recently wrote a detailed 4-day Mexico City itinerary for my blog, and you can read the full post there. I will link it in the show description. Writing that made me want to go back to Mexico City because there is still so much that I have yet to do and experience. But in this video, I am sharing my top recommendations for where you should stay, what you should see and do, and even some tips on where you're going to want to eat while you are in Mexico City. Let's start with where you should stay when you are visiting Mexico City. There are sort of 3 main zones that tourists flock to because they tend to be considered safer and built up well for tourism. The first is Polanco, which is actually where I stayed my very first time in Mexico City. I would say it's probably one of, if not the most fancy or the fanciest neighborhood in Mexico City. There's a lot of shopping here. There's actually a really good food tour you can take here that I'll link as well. The other is Condesa, and then there's Roma Norte. So these are popular areas that you're probably going to be ending up spending time in, even if you're not staying directly in those areas. My second visit, we actually stayed in the city center. The city center is a pretty busy, bustling area, of course. It was an ideal place to stay because it was centrally located, but I really chose where I wanted to stay based on the hotel more than the location being in the center. Because on my first visit to Mexico City, a friend and I ate at this rooftop restaurant, Balcón de Zócalo, and realized it's part of a hotel. And I thought the next time I come to Mexico City, I want to stay at this hotel and just have this beautiful rooftop for breakfast and dinner. How convenient. And so that's exactly what my sister and I did. We stayed at the Zócalo Hotel, right on the Zócalo, which is the main square in Mexico City. And it was great. I really enjoyed this stay, so that's what I recommend you do as well if you are looking for a convenient yet beautiful place to stay. One note though, if you do plan to dine at the restaurant, it is a popular sunset rooftop for people to have dinner with a view, so make sure you make reservations in advance. Now let's talk about some of the things to do in Mexico City. When you read blog posts about this or watch videos about it, you're going to see a lot of the same places, which I will touch on as well, some of the key highlights. But I don't want to start with that. I want to start with actually the best, coolest day trip that my sister and I actually took on my last visit. That takes you, yes, outside of Mexico City, but I'm still going to count it as a thing to do in Mexico City because that's your base. So the trip that I'm talking about is a visit to Grutas de Tolantongo. You will see these beautiful cliffside pools that are filled with thermal water, heated water that you can go and swim in and just enjoy looking out at these magnificent mountain views while you soak in these hot springs. There is also this incredible thermal river that you are going to get to swim in. There is a really neat suspension bridge. There is this gorgeous cave with a waterfall that you can swim under the cave opening. There's also a cave that you can walk through. I didn't do that because I tend to get a little claustrophobic. My sister tried it and she made it maybe halfway through and then came back, thank God, because I was out there praying for her safety. It's just an incredible way to spend the day. It's in this town of Hidalgo, about 4 hours away from Mexico City.
Up on TikTok and other places, so and they're not really into advertising, so pretty much all the visitors start to do the advertising for them.
You could rent a car and go and do this on your own, but for us, for me and my sister, doing this as a full day trip, and it was a long day, best way to do it. We got to see everything, do everything, have a dedicated local expert guide. I have a full blog post on this as well. Listen, I have done my work. I've done all the write-ups for you so you can dig deeper into anything I talk about on this video. In that write-up, I include what you should expect, what you should pack, the exact tour that we took, just key considerations and things to know. Now let's get back into Mexico City, and I'm going to start by telling you some of my favorite things to do, which are not things that I really expected would be my favorite things to do going into Mexico City. Mexico City has these incredible green spaces in the midst of being this really busy city. I love escaping to these green places. One of my absolute favorite things to do, I'll take an Uber to this particular bakery at this address, Esperanza, and you go in and there are just rows and rows of breads, and you could just grab a tray and bread heaven. You can just choose whatever breads and pastries you want, and then you can walk from this cafe right across the street and into the beautiful Chapultepec Park. And this park is humongous. There are ponds, there are ducks, there are picnic benches, there are vendors selling unique souvenirs or fun treats and all of this stuff. There's a lot of life, and then there's a lot of tranquil spaces as well within this park. Chapultepec Castle is one of the main tourist attractions in Mexico City. There is always a line. I have not yet been up myself, but I do know that it is said to have one of the best views over Mexico City from up there. It's still on my list to go check it out. If you go, I recommend getting there early and doing that first thing so that you can get up there, get gorgeous photos, see what you want to see, and then maybe explore the park afterward. Another one of my personal favorite things to do in Mexico City is to go to the Condesa neighborhood, and they have this beautiful circular path called Avenida Amsterdam. You can get dropped off at any point along this, and it's just this circular path that you can walk being surrounded by greenery. You can get off the path at any point that you want because there are a lot of coffee shops and restaurants, and so you could just kind of stroll and eat and do a little mini food tour. The first time I visited, my friends and I saw this chocolate shop, and we stopped in there and just got a variety of different chocolates and had a little chocolate tasting of our own. If you like to wander and just explore in new cities, these are a couple of places for some controlled wandering. Other things you want to do, you want to see the Palacio de Bellas Artes. You can also go and see a show here. Ballet, you can go see an orchestra performance. Book all of that in advance if that's something that you are interested in doing. Across the street from this gorgeous building is a Sears. And if you go into this building and you go all the way up the escalators, you will hit a cafe with a balcony, and guess what it looks out over? That's right, the Palacio de Bellas Artes and its little plaza. Got seated pretty quickly. At first they seated us in the back row. We ordered our food and drink, and as soon as people emptied up the spot at the balcony where you get the best view, they moved us up. So they seem to have a pretty good system of rotating people in and out. Close to the Palacio de Bellas Artes is the House of Tiles building, which is a pretty photo spot, but also inside is this really cool restaurant, and it has pretty decent reviews. So if you're looking for a good lunch spot, you might want to check that out as well. While you're in the centro, you also will obviously want to check out the Zocalo. which is the center square. You will see the beautiful Mexican flag flying strong and high here. And around the plaza, there are other areas you might want to explore. There is a cathedral, there is another museum, there are buildings of historic significance. So depending on what your vibe is when you travel, if you are into museums, you're going to find a lot of that. One other thing that I will say in terms of things to do in Mexico City that you're probably not going to find on a lot of itineraries, but I always make sure to do when I'm in this part of the world, is if you care about getting your nails done, is affordable for having great work done. So you can get gel manicures, hand-painted designs. Even if you are leaving a good tip, which you should, it's going to be more affordable to get your nails done there. And what a fun little thing to get your nails done where you're traveling. So I always like to do something like that. If that applies to you, go ahead and do the same. That's pretty high level, and these are again based on my personal favorite things to do in Mexico City. There is no shortage of amazing places to eat at while you are in Mexico City. I'm just going to give you some of the top ones that I have personally gone to. A food tour is always a great way to get to know a new city. Since we've been talking a lot about being in the center of Mexico City, while you are there, you need to check out Churreria El Moro. It's a popular churro shop. Is it the best churros I've ever had? I don't know. You be the judge. You go try it out. They have all these different varieties of dipping chocolates that you can get and different churros. Always poppin', there's always people there. So just go experience it for yourself. It's been around for a really long time, so it's always fun to go and check that out. You can see them making some of the churros. And it's a pretty big space. As busy as it is, I've never had a problem getting a seat. Also, I already talked about the restaurant at the Balcón de Zócalo. Not only does it have these beautiful views at sunset and it's part of this great hotel, I actually really enjoyed the food here. We've tried a few different dishes. Everything is delicious. My favorite thing to get here is a really weird choice for me because I really don't like soup, but their tortilla soup is amazing. So that's the one soup that I will make an exception for. If you are not able to make it to Oaxaca City, I highly recommend it. I have a good video about that as well. But there is this beautiful Oaxacan restaurant. They did tableside guacamole. They have beautiful cocktails and really delicious Oaxacan cuisine in a really elegant yet cozy is the best way that I can describe the feeling of being in this restaurant. So check that out if you can. Before I went to Mexico City, I was with a friend that I had made, a local to Costa Rica. While I was in Mexico City, she texted me and said, check out this restaurant. This is where all of the people in the know are going these days in Mexico City. It's got a nice vibe to it. We went for lunch and the food was delicious. It's hard to have a bad meal in Mexico City. And then, of course, there are also fine dining experiences in Mexico City. Mexico City has just under, I believe, around 20 Michelin-starred restaurants. Pujol is the most famous one that I know I've heard a lot about. Every time I am thinking about going to Mexico City or I'm there, I look and see reservations are never available. So if you know that there is a specific place you would like to eat, book your reservations well in advance and maybe even plan your trip around it. There is so much to do in Mexico City. I myself feel like I have scratched the surface of it. If you are on the fence about visiting Mexico City, I just want to give you a little nudge over. Go experience it for yourself, enjoy it, and then come back and tell me all about your favorite thing that you did while you were there. Adios.